Welcome. I hope everyone is having a blessed evening. The much anticipated next episode. I'm grateful for those of you that can make it. By the way, huge shout out to those of you that have been chatting on the live chats, whether it's inside of Discord conversations, whether it's on the Thinking Cup website. Some of you have reached out and emailed me, challenged me on research, ideas, concepts. Thank you. I do appreciate that. I'm grateful for all of you for reaching out. If you're unfamiliar with the best way to connect with me as we get started, well, scan the code first and foremost, and you'll have all of the ways that you can connect with me. Do me a favor and hit the like, subscribe, share with others as we get started. We have been trying something new recently, and that is, we kicked off a Patreon support platform. And so if you enjoy what it is that we're doing, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. You can read the items here. Go to the website, the Patreon /The Thinking Cup. You can find ways to support the cause. I will say that as I go through this, I had an interesting interaction this last week with we'll just call it an anonymous individual that was chastising me for asking for support. So I'm not sure how that works, since the Adventist Church constantly asks for support inside of their mechanisms, and yet it's evil for other people to ask for support. So anyways, if you want to financially provide some support for the ministry, I would be honored for you to partner with us. You'll notice on the right-hand side, there is one that is a larger contribution. All of these get the same benefits. There's a private Discord channel that you'll get access to that gives you direct access to some of the background research, as well as now that I'm going through my master's program, which, by the way, just started this week. I had my first class actually this morning, bright and early at 6:20 a.m. That was exciting. So a lot of my the stuff I'm reading, the research documents that I'll be writing, the stuff that will be going on inside of those classes, I'll be sharing with that specific group. It's a private Discord channel on the Discord server. By the way, if you do register through the Patreon, by the way, thank you before I forget. Thank you for those of you that have registered. If you do, make sure that when you're setting up the account that you kind of go in, you have to connect your Discord account to this server, so that way you'll get access to the private channels that we have inside of Discord. By the way, big shout out to Scooby on the Discord channel for all of his help with setting up the technology. I love the community inside of Discord. We have about 80 to 85 people now. And by the way, if you just want to join the Discord channel, jump in, scan the code, join the Discord channel. By the way, that doesn't mean there is Discord. It just means that is the technology. It's actually a gaming technology, but it is a huge value for conversation inside the platform. So please do join. Now, the last thing about announcements, okay? Hopefully you've scanned the code. Hopefully you've checked out the Patreon account. We are going to have, this is a big announcement, we are going to have a Q&A coming up, okay? We are going to have a Q&A. It is not going to be a just throw questions at me type of Q&A. It will be something that you will need to submit your questions to me over the next couple of weeks. Now, you can do this in a couple of ways, and specifically the questions that I'll be addressing is specifically to this series, okay? So we're probably about halfway through all of the episodes, maybe 2/3 of the way through the episodes for this Spirit of Hypocrisy series. And so I figured it would be good to do a Q&A. So all you need to do is, again, jump into the Discord channel. Is probably the easiest way to do this. You can privately connect with me there and just submit your questions to me privately in the direct messages. The second way you can do this is you just head over to thethinkingcup.com. There is a great way that you can chat on that website. Some have asked, is that AI? No, it's not. It is always me responding. The first initial kind of interaction is obviously the system asking how they can help. But any kind of questions that you have there, as long as you notate that this is a question that you would like addressed in the Q&A for the Ellen White series, I will be happy to include them. Okay? All right. Well, without any further ado, I think we should jump in to the conversation today. All right. Well, it is good to have everyone again. Thank you for being here. By the way, if this is your first time jumping in, let me just set up the stage a little bit. As we dive into the conversation today, I always like to preface it with, I have done hours of research. I do not claim to be perfect in this research. I have been known to make a few mistakes. Some of you have reached out and let me know that some of the dates are maybe inaccurate or things that need to be updated. I totally appreciate that in the spirit of quality research. What I have done on the presentations is I have at the very bottom of the presentation, you'll see a timeline. Now that timeline doesn't always reflect the actual citation at the top. Part of the reason for that is sometimes these quotes come from later compilations or researchers that are quoting or dialoguing on a time period. As best I can, the timeline at the bottom will deal with the time frame that the quote or the interaction is supposed to be taking place. So hopefully that will help you all as you interact and as you engage. Now, as I tell everyone, please do your own research. Please double check me, fact check me. You should be able to find all these documents, whether it's on the Ellen White website or wherever you do your private research. So today's exciting. Today, I cannot wait. I have been working feverishly today to get finished with today's presentation because I really wanted to get this out this week. It's going to be good. It's going to be a good one. So today we're diving in to what I would consider kind of some jaw-dropping interactions with Adventist history. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Ellen White and the opium-laced cholera mixture. Yes, you heard me right. Opium-laced, okay? And some very serious mixed messages. We're going to kick this off with some very serious mixed messages around what she calls poisonous drugs. Now, buckle up, as I always say, buckle up, because this one's going to be a wild one. We're covering 3 different topics tonight, 3 different parts of the segment, and we're going to kick it off with, well, why not just share something straight from Ellen White? Okay, I think this is a fairly prophetic statement. They saw that they must cloak their hypocrisy under the thickest concealment. Oh my. Now, to be fair, Ellen White was not specifically talking about herself in that quote. She was actually dialoguing about the Pharisees and Sadducees. But if the shoe fits, why not wear it, right? So let's kick it off with kind of medicine back in the 1800s. So if we go all the way back to the 1800s, setting kind of the stage of the conversation, America during the 1800s was quite literally a wild west of medicine. They had tonics, they had nostrums, they had tinctures, and none of these things were regulated. They were totally unregulated. Some of these concoctions had straight up poisons in them, like mercury, for example, okay, and many other kind of what we know today to be highly poisonous. There were narcotics involved, things like opium and cocaine. Okay, you name it, it could be used. There was really no regulation inside of this part of the kind of the growth in the 1800s. Now, people actually thought that many of these concoctions were legit cures. Now, as we walk on the stage of tonight's conversation, well, I want to take you to 1855. Okay? In 1855, James White, as we know the history, James White fell very ill. In fact, he had a cough that we see in the books at 1855, and he uses a concoction called Hugh's syrup. Now, I'm not putting this on the screen because this is actually a publisher's note. You're welcome to look this up, okay? It is a Ellen White estate publisher note that is found in the Ellen G. White Letters and Manuscripts, Volume 1, page 627, where it's just a side note that they kind of note this in kind of the reference material, okay? This is not a primary source document. It's the publishers that are kind of notating on this. Now, we don't have the exact formula for Hugh's balsam, this specific syrup. Okay? It's actually lost. Okay, most cough syrups commonly in the day featured things like alcohol, laudanum, tincture of opium, morphine. In fact, it had cocaine. It had chloroform. I'm going to show you all the details of this. Yes, I told you this is going to be jaw-dropping. Okay, it's a little bit of a crazy one tonight. Now, by 1866, as we get on the scene of 1866, there was an FDA pioneer, many of you know him, by the name of Uriah Smith. Uriah Smith warned of this stuff, and this is the quote from Advent Review and Sabbath Herald, Volume 27. This is April 10, 1866, in which Uriah Smith specifically says, avoid all nostrums and you see it in quotes, you're going to hear this, cholera medicines, okay? Most of them will do more harm than good. Most of them will do more harm than good. Now, this sounds great, okay? This sounds like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be using this. As you probably won't be surprised, while this is a common thing that's being stated, Ellen White is also publicly denouncing drug medicines. We go to 1905. Here's this. Okay, so I mean, really, so far so good. I don't see a problem with this, right? I mean, drugs are bad, right? They're going to destroy your brain. They shouldn't be done. patent medicines are bad, opium is bad. Like, I don't disagree with this statement. This is 1905, by the way. Okay, this is very late in her career. You're going to see the problem. This is a setup for 1905. She's going to pass away within 10 years. Now, here's the twist to all of this, as you probably already are aware. There is a lesser known thread inside of this story, a behind the scenes interaction, and an Ellen White that reportedly maintained a private cache of drug-based remedies. Yes, a private store of drug-based remedies. They were kept specifically for the use of her family. She shared them with others, but you're going to see a very different persona as she claims what she wants to claim for the natural public. Now, as we get into, I don't know how much history you all know, okay, but there was a horrible pandemic called cholera that was terrifying. That was killing millions of people. Died in the 19th century. It was a horrible epidemic. Ellen specifically never got cholera, but James White, her husband, did in 1865. Their son also got it. Edson got cholera in 1866, and fortunately, both of them did survive those interactions. Now, cholera is one thing, but this is the place where stage left, okay, enters what's called a cholera mixture. And you're going to see this in a lot of medical documents, but you're going to see it a lot in Ellen White's items as well. Now, cholera mixture was a popular tonic. It was a mixture, okay? It was used for things like diarrhea, vomiting, nausea. It was supposedly supposed to help, okay, with the issues of cholera. And surprise, surprise, again, it was not regulated. Surprise, surprise, the manufacturers commonly include two things: alcohol, and alcohol is one thing. I don't have a problem with that personally. And opium. This is a common occurrence, okay? Now, where do we get some of this information? Well, I have mentioned this several times. This is actually a document that I would encourage you to pick up and read all of it, okay? This is Ronald Graybill from 2019. It's a Spectrum 47, issue 4. This is an article called Mrs. Temple. I've referenced it. I believe I referenced it last time. A millennial utopian. And he writes with regards to this. We should insert here parenthetically that the other recipe, Mrs. White, now remember, there was Temple's recipe, right? This is a different recipe that Mrs. White used was quite different. Cholera mixture included a liberal dose of brandy and a bit of opium. And we get a reference here to what was also included. I'm going to talk about laudanum in just a second. Opium was in the form of this laudanum. Now, Ronald Graybill is, just so you all know, he's formerly the White Estate, with the White Estate, and had access to unreleased material. So what you are reading there is information that you and I would normally have access to, and he uses that in the disclosure of his article, okay? And he reveals that Ellen White had a handwritten recipe for that Ellen White kind of had for a cholera mixture in the back of her diary. Okay. Now, it included both brandy and laudanum. Okay, brandy, if you don't know, is a form of alcohol. Laudanum, we're going to get into here. I'm going to share the details on it. Is a form of opium. Now, this comes from a website. You're welcome to look it up. This is an article written on the Victorian era medicine. I actually have referenced this before. But you'll see there in the upper right-hand corner some images of what this potion would be, and notice it says poison on it. But this is kind of what we need to pay close attention to. Laudanum typically had about 10% opium and up to roughly 50% alcohol. Okay, and you'll see that in the quote here. You'll see 10% opium, 50% alcohol. Notice that it was also extremely addictive. It was very addictive, okay? That is really important for us to remember and to keep in mind as we're dialoguing about this. Due to its, now, this quote at the top is actually wrong. Please strike this. This is the previous page, so this is actually coming from this same article, Victorian era medicine. Due to its bitter taste, it is mixed with many things, including spices, honey, ether, or chloroform, wine, whiskey, brandy, and even mercury and hashish. Depending on the strength of the tincture and the severity of symptoms, a typical adult dose ranged from 10 to 30 drops. Now, this was a common over-the-counter in the 1800s, widely used for cough-related issues and insomnia. And it was highly addictive. Okay? Until addiction, later on in American history, until addiction became extremely rampant, it was eventually restricted, actually, in the U.S. in 1906. It was then further restricted in England in 1950. It was actually banned, FDA banned, okay? So it's important to understand that this stuff that many times we read in these articles, and we're going to see things going on as I put some quotes on the screen, understand that these mixtures had both alcohol and opium in them. Yes, these were probably, these were the good old days, right? All right, so let's jump in to 1861. I want to fast forward just a little bit to 1861. Now remember in 1865 and 66, okay, both of those years, James and Edson got cholera. So you're going to see that they're going to end up using this stuff. But this is 1861 as we dive into the conversation. Now, Ellen White is going to write. She's helping a helper here. She's writing a helper. You'll see that in the top. This is written to Jenny. Her name was Jenny Fraser, July 26, 1861. And she has a very specific request. And here's the request. She says, Jenny, please find the recipe, if you can, to make cholera mixture and get the preparations to make only a pint. That's quite a bit. Remember the number of remember how many drops you had to use, okay? After you have made it, don't part with it, but let any that wish make it themselves as we have done. I do not wish to be without it. Pay attention to what she says. I don't want to be without it. Father and mother will often want it to use. Fix up mother's room as nice as you can and spare no pains to make our parents happy. Okay. So I want you to notice the context of this request. This is 1861, okay? She wanted it on hand. That was very clear. She did not want to separate from it. She wanted it close by. That already is suspect. Okay. Her parents often, notice that the often is in there. Her parents often used, we want to use it, use this mixture. Apparently, even absent to cholera diagnosis. It was used for other things, suggesting, in my opinion, that this was probably should be understood as a go-to house remedy. Remember, just because it's called cholera mixture, it was used for many other things. Diarrhea, nausea, okay, all of that stuff, all right? Now, whether Ellen used it herself, specifically from this letter, is unclear. Okay, that we don't know. Okay, we can't say yet from this letter. But she apparently, if you caught it, she apparently wanted it made, she wanted it used, and she wanted it provided for other people. Okay? Now, we know that she still had cholera mixture. She still had this decades later. How do we know this? Well, let's fast forward to 1893. Let me set this up. This is a little bit of an odd situation, but Ellen White had a dental procedure done. And after this dental procedure, the doctor was fairly rattled by what happened, okay? And Ellen gave, this is so odd, but Ellen gave the physician that worked on her teeth some cholera mixture. Here's the quote. After the teeth were extracted, this is 1893, Sister Caro shook like an aspen leaf. Her hands were shaking. She was suffering pain of body. She had felt sick, she said, on the cars during her 10-hour ride. She dreaded to give pain to Sister White. So Sister Caro's working on Sister White, okay? She slept little Tuesday night and could scarcely eat in the morning, but she knew she must perform the operation and went through with it. When the patient waited upon the doctor, I had her seated in my easy chair and gave her sips of cholera mixture, all the stimulus I had in the house. Now, I want to be clear on something for this. She clearly, notice at the end, all of the stimulus, she's identifying it as a stimulus. It's a drug, okay? All the stimulus I had in the house. Notice that she kept it on supply. She had it. We're going to see other instances of this coming up. Now, we also know that it traveled with her. If you've been with us for the last few episodes, you know that Ellen White and traveling is a thing. It's kind of the thing that gets her off the hook. So 1893 is when this whole incident with Sister Caro happened. Let's fast forward 6 more years. We're going to go to 5 more years, my bad. We're going to go to 1898. And in 1898, she lamented that her cholera mixture had been left behind. This should already give you pause, just the way this is phrased. Here's what she says. And by the way, I want you to notice at the very top where the citation is. This was previously unpublished, thanks to the hacking of the White Estate by an individual that was out of Australia. There were documents that were released that we previously didn't have, and these were some of those unpublished, I don't want to call them oops, but they randomly happened to show up after the hacking during one of the anniversary celebrations. Oh, we're going to release all this, okay? So here we go. It says, when we reached Bundaberg, I was as wretched as I have been at times before with this attack. Now, I don't know exactly, this is me stepping in. I don't know what an attack is. I don't know if, I mean, your mind can go wild here. because we already know that she was addicted to wine vinegar. We already know that she was an alcoholic. We already know that some of her other situations should give you pause. So I don't know what kind of attack this is. I don't know if it's an anxiety attack, a depression attack. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like she's having withdrawal attack. I don't know what it was. Okay. Back to the quote. The cholera mixture had been left in Brisbane. We had literally nothing with us for a case of illness. So just notice that it's a remedy not just for cholera, but it is a remedy for any kind of illness. Okay. We had literally nothing with us for a case of illness. We rode to the hotel for the cars, went no further that night. In the providence of God, we found an unoccupied room which had 2 beds in it and which opened with French doors to a piazza, broad and high. I had not the least difficulty in breathing, for the ventilation was good. It was late before I retired. Okay, so let me just summarize kind of the pattern that we're seeing that's emerging. Just in the short time that we've been on so far. She kept a supply of this at home. She dispensed it to others, including her parents, a visiting physician. She traveled with it. She was now, given her documented struggles with dependency, we already explored this before. She's already been exposed as a needing dependency on other items. It's possible, now this is me surmising, it's possible that she used this herself. It would seem like this incident would say, well, if she had it on her, she would have used it, okay? That is yet to be confirmed, but it is possible, and I think that the evidence is very clear. Now, on a side note, just as we deal with this circumstance, I have a little bit of a tangent that I want to go on for just a second. This is a medical tangent. And I think it's worth noting to pay attention to this. There is a subset, remember, opiates and alcohol are 2 of the main things in this substance. And it's highly addictive, okay? There is a subset of opiate users that experience delusions and hallucinations. Now, we know this from recent medical research. This is actually 2021. I'm not going to read through this. You can take a snapshot. You can go read. This is at a website called the Recovery Village. You're welcome to read this. But opiates can cause hallucinations. That doesn't mean they always cause it, but they can, okay? They can cause dysphoria, which is profound sadness. It can make you irritable, delusional. Like, there is a subset, and I'm not saying this to say this is Ellen. Just understand that this stuff was bad stuff, okay? And it was highly unregulated. There was no way of knowing how much, okay? It's like the unregulated black market drug market nowadays, where you don't know exactly what you're going to get, okay? If you're buying drugs from a drug dealer, okay? Makes me wonder if Ellen White was a drug dealer. That was a side note. Now, dysphoria can be, which is like profound sadness. It can also be kind of a side effect that can contribute to depression. Now, I want to leave this part of the conversation with this quote here. This is actually taken from the same website under an article called Laudanum Addiction. Now, remember, laudanum was one of the primary components of the cholera mixture. It says this: in Victorian era Europe and North America, that is Ellen White's era, okay, laudanum was lauded as a cure-all remedy and creative aid by artists and civilian alike. As a liquid composed mostly of alcohol, laudanum was mostly taken orally, buccally and sublimely, to soothe physical and mental ailments. However, as a form of highly addictive drug, opium, laudanum is far from a healthy elixir. Keep that in your mind as we're continuing to move from this. This is medically documented today. This is 2020. This is recent research. We know that it was used during that time period. We know that it was a cure-all remedy. We know exclusively that it had opium in it. We know that laudanum was highly addictive. We know that it was absolutely unhealthy for you. We know these things. Now, everything we've looked at with Ellen White right now would be considered her private use of cholera mixture. So I want to move into her public counsel, which is interesting because her public counsel to others drew some very hard lines against narcotics. And what is opium? It's a narcotic. Okay. So let's look at some of these as we move in. Do you see the irony here? Do you see the irony? I can't help but laugh. Um, she's claiming here that true Christians cannot persist. She's calling it a poison and that it stupefies the brain, that it benumbs the sensibilities, and that's probably very accurate. Okay, but she's consuming it. That's a problem. Ellen White, come on. Now, she is going to urge a concerted effort to discontinue the use of this as we get into this. Here's the next quote that we're going to look at. Oh, Ellen, so you're telling other people that God is displeased, but then behind closed door, oh, you can't hear that? All this time, you can't hear it. All right, hold on just a second. This is horrible. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Thank you for saying that, friends. Okay, let me get this for a second. I apologize. Thank you for sharing this. Let me get this up again. Man, I am so glad that you guys mentioned this. Let me get this on one more time. Wait, hold on. Let me get this. Oh, you're gonna get them now. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna go back to the previous one, and we're just gonna go through the previous two real quick again so you hear them. Okay.
The opium slave is in a pitiful condition. Unless his nervous system is continually intoxicated with the poisonous drug, he is miserable. It benumbs the sensibilities, stupefies the brain, and unfits the mind for the service of God. True Christians cannot persist in the use of this slow poison when they know its influence upon them.
All right, just give me a quick comment before I move on. I want to make sure that you're hearing this. I want you to hear and we've got several others, so I'm glad that you mentioned that the audio wasn't working. Man, I'm so glad that you guys mentioned that. True Christians cannot persist in the use of this slow poison. What does she say next?
Those who use opium cannot render to God any more acceptable service than can the drunkard or the tobacco user. Those who break off the use of this nerve and brain-destroying practice will have to possess fortitude and suffer, as will the drunkard and the tobacco slave, when deprived of their body and mind-destroying indulgences. God is displeased that his followers should become slaves to habits which ruin body and mind.
God is displeased. Let's just keep moving. What else does she say?
Diseases of every stripe and type have been brought upon human beings by the use of tea and coffee and the narcotics, opium, and tobacco. These hurtful indulgences must be given up, not only one but all, for all are hurtful and ruinous to the physical, mental, and moral powers, and should be discontinued from a health standpoint.
From a health standpoint. So notice what she's saying. I mean, very, very clear in the description. Okay, um, and I have taken the effort to change the actual narration to adjust with the age. Okay, because 1887, she's kind of middle aged. That would be kind of the age frame, the image there. Kurt, stay with me because you're gonna absolutely love. Okay, this you're gonna love in just a second. We've got some things coming, my friend, that you're gonna like. So I want you to pay attention that she says something really important right here. These hurtful indulgences must be given up, not only one, but all. Okay? Hypocrite much? Hypocrite much? Yeah. Now, we're going to go back a little bit in the date frame here, and we're going to check out a couple more here.
The only safe course is to touch not, taste not, handle not tea, coffee, wines, tobacco, opium, and alcoholic drinks. The only safe course is to touch not, taste not, handle not tea, coffee, wines, tobacco, opium, and alcoholic drinks. The necessity for the men of this generation to call to their aid the power of the will, strengthened by the grace of God, in order to withstand the temptations of Satan and resist the least indulgence of perverted appetite, is twice as great as it was several generations ago. But the present generation have less power of self-control than had those who lived then. Those who have indulged the appetite for these stimulants have transmitted their depraved appetites and passions to their children, and greater moral power is required to resist intemperance in all its forms. The only perfectly safe course to pursue is to stand firmly on the side of temperance and not venture in the path of danger.
All right. So you heard it from her. I mean, the only perfectly safe course is to err on the side of temperance, to not venture down this path. But again, catch the irony of what she's saying. Okay? Catch the irony. I mean, she's telling everyone else, you need to avoid it. You need to avoid it. Notice, indulge the appetite of these stimulants. Now, you remember in the quote that I gave you that she identified cholera mixture as a stimulant. And we know that this has opium in it. I mean, I want to be very, very clear in what is happening in these items. Now, this next slide, she's going to call opium and laudanum. She's going to actually call it out. Remember, that's the key ingredient in the cholera mixture. And she's going to call them life and health destroying drugs.
He is tempting men to secure money value in every objectionable way possible. But the most successful way is to become so besotted with poisonous liquor and tobacco, and the various drugs, opium, laudanum, and kindred drugs, to use them, until the countenance bears the irritated, inflamed representation in the features of the face, destroying the moral image of God in man. Thus, whole families are reduced below the level of the brute creation. It is these temptations to deal in these life and health destroying drugs that are legalized by the laws of the nation until the whole family is ruined.
It's it probably will freak some of you out to see some of this. I'm hoping that this is hitting home because look at the date. Okay, look at the date. 1903. 1903. This is very close to the last decade of her life. She was older. She would be feeling like she was much more of an older individual, and she's still. I mean, just notice she's calling it the various drugs. She's naming liquor, which she herself drinks. We don't think that she ever did anything with tobacco, but we know that she's taking opium and laudanum. We know that. We have very clear. Not only is she suggesting it for others, okay, but it's very clear that she is she's almost, again, remember that original quote, I couldn't find, remember how she said, I wish that we hadn't left it back on the train when they were traveling. I mean, just remember those things as we're going through some of these items. Now, she's also going to warn that these sap the vital forces. She loved that word, vital forces, and force the body to labor to expel the poison, is what she called.
He gave the patient a more powerful portion of opium, which he said would set her all right. Her ravings did not cease until she became thoroughly intoxicated. She then passed into a death-like stupor. The gentleman mentioned looked upon the patient and said sadly, "Her days are numbered. The efforts nature has made have been so many times overpowered by this poison that the vital forces are exhausted by being repeatedly induced to unnatural action to rid the system of this poisonous drug. Nature's efforts are about to cease, and then the patient's suffering life will end."
Oh, well, is she forgetting that she's consuming cholera mixture that has opium in it along with alcohol? I mean, she's consuming this for a normal, not just a remedy, but it's a cure-all drug. Okay, so her recommendations. I'm sorry, I had to put this on the screen. That is actually quite funny. Thank you for making the comment. So her recommendations for care, okay, what does she say needs to happen? Educate away from drugs and treat with natural remedies. And most of you, if you've been Adventist for a long period of time, by the way, welcome if you're a current Adventist. If you've left Adventism, you know what the common response is. She advocated for pure air, pure water, and healthful exercise, all while cautioning physicians themselves to not resort to drugs. Pay attention to what she says.
They are employed, the better the patient will prosper. The use of tea, coffee, tobacco, opium, wine, beer, and other stimulants gives nature a false support. Physicians should understand how to treat the sick through the use of nature's remedies. Pure air, pure water, and healthful exercise should be employed in the treatment of the sick.
Okay, so very clearly she makes the statement. This is 1888, 1892. Okay, this is right in the middle of that era where, again, early on in the 1860s, we have a very clear understanding that there was cholera mixture. We know now that she's telling physicians to not use the very thing that she was using as a natural remedy. Okay. Now in 1899, she is going to make a statement. She actually wrote in the review this particular item.
Every additional drug given to the patient, whether it be opium or some other poison, will complicate the case and make the patient's recovery more hopeless. the drugs given to stupefy, whatever they may be, derange the nervous system, an evil simple in the beginning, which nature aroused herself to overcome, and which she would have overcome had she been left to herself, has been made tenfold worse by the introduction of drug poisons into the system. The result of these poisons is a destructive disease of itself, forcing into extraordinary action the remaining life forces to war against and overcome the drug intruder.
I don't know why it keeps pausing near the end, but maybe y'all are freaking out so much that it's pausing the video. So just notice what she's saying. I mean, she's claiming that these drugs, right? Whether it's opium, she's very clearly calling out, okay? She's calling out these things, and yet she kept opium-laced cholera mixture on hand, and she administered it to others. We also know that she took it on the road with her. Now, I'm saying, right? I mean, listen, I'm not saying that opium's like horrible to use for medical reasons. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'm just telling you that Ellen, we're looking at the hypocrisy of Ellen White. Does she follow the same advice that she gives other people, or is she stating one thing for everyone else, and then privately behind closed doors, or when she's traveling, or when she's sick, or whatever it might be, she's doing her own thing? Now, this is my question as we go into this. How do we reconcile her public warnings against opiates while her private use, her private storage, her distribution of things like laudanum-based cholera mixture is very, very clear? How do you reconcile this? This, as an Adventist, should make you feel uneasy. Don't brush this aside. Was this just, I mean, some people, was this just common practice? Like, oh, everyone was doing it, and now that makes it okay. Oh, Ellen White was just a human. Remember, she claimed in many of these instances, and as we look at some of this as we go through the evening, she makes oftentimes statements that she says, I was shown. That's a directive from God. That's not just a, well, I'm a human, I make a mistake thing. Could this be the case of what I said last time? Do as I say, not as I do. Is that where we're at? I think so. Another kind of question, another thing to think about. If opiates can cause things like hallucinations, dysphoria, dependency, we looked at all of that, okay? If that's the case, should that factor into how we analyze these situations? Should we look at how to deal with these things that interact with health, visions, and mood? And by the way, I want to remind everyone, if you're just joining us, don't brush this off as, oh, these were just over the counter. Oh, these were just, okay, understand that the drug industry during this time, the specific cholera mixture, was unregulated. There was absolutely no regulation during this time of this particular type of drug. You could use it however you wanted, for whatever you wanted. If you thought it, now, what did opium do? It made you feel better. So why not, right? Now, I'm really not trying to sensationalize this, okay? These are documented details with citations. I have said this before. Please check these quotes out yourself. This tension that you guys are experiencing, that I have experienced as I've been doing the research, is real. It should be real. The tension is this. Ellen White very clearly says, this is a direct quote, condemn drug poisons. She publicly does that, all while keeping and sharing a tonic that contains it. That tension should cause you pause, okay? Now, I want you to kind of drop in the comments. I want you to share as we're going through this. Like, do you think this is hypocrisy? Do you think this is just like silly Mike Colburn? You're missing the context, Mike. Like, what do you think? Like, these are quotes. These are not, am I missing the point? And I always find it interesting. Individuals like ADL, individuals like Kevin Morgan. I've not engaged with Judd Lake, which, by the way, funny story. Don't judge me on this, okay? I know Judd Lake. I took classes from him at Southern, and ironically, again, I told you don't judge me, okay? But I proposed to my wife in Judd Lake's class. Don't judge me. Some of you are like, that's not very romantic. Well, it worked, okay? It's interesting because most of these interactions, I've gotten a little bit of like, as I told you in the beginning, most of the Adventist apologists out there that have responded have said things like, oh, you're just taking it out of context. So my question is this. What context is this right? What context is it okay for someone to consume drugs privately and yet tell others that it's evil and that it stupefies the brain and that God doesn't like it and that all these other things? Like, what context is that okay? I don't understand. Okay. All right. So that's the first segment. That's dealing with opiates. Okay. That's what we're dealing with. Now I want to move into the second segment of the conversation this evening, and we're going to move into fashion. We're going to move into this hat craze. And as we dive into this part of the conversation, I want to pull into this discussion a quote from Matthew 23, verse 4 in the New Testament. And this is Jesus that is making this statement of the scribes and Pharisees. And he says this, they tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others. But they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. I want this to be the framework by which we look at this conversation as we work out today. Now, let's move to March 1861. March 1861, we have someone by the name of Mrs. H that claimed that, surprise, surprise, she saw Ellen White, quote, dressed very richly. Oh no, she saw Ellen White dressed a certain way. And here's what it says, okay? It says, you do not possess the qualification of a Christian. You must be converted and reformed. If you believe the visions, why not upon them? Now, she's getting kind of claimed here. She's kind of getting hammered. This is in Testimonies, okay? And this is a testimony written against Mrs. H for fault-finding kind of this spirit of dress in Ellen White, okay? She says, you say that you have read, she quotes her testimony, and he refers to the last two paragraphs that when people you ask have asked you how Sister White has dressed, you had to tell them that you were disappointed to find that my dress was not in accordance with what I had written in regards to dress. I would say, I consider my dress to be in strict accordance with what I have written. Now, I want you to notice the very next statement. Okay? She's claiming that she is very strictly following her own advice with regards to dress. And she makes this audacious claim. I would say I consider my dress to be in strict accordance with what I've written in regards to dress. If I write one thing and act another, I want to repeat this. For all of the apologists that jump on here and they jump on my case, Mike, you're taking it out of context. Ellen White herself, in a rebuttal response to someone who is telling her, I saw you wear something. I saw you wear something that's against your own teachings. Her rebuttal is, listen, Mrs. H, Mr. H, is it Mr. H? Mrs. H. If I write one thing, one thing, and act another, I am a hypocrite. And then here's the statement that Mrs. H said. You have reported that I was dressed very richly in Knoxville. Now, once again, that's the tension. I want you to feel the tension. You know, this is not a tension that should just be like, oh, it's those critics that are like dealing with it in the 2020s, like silly Mike Colburn that's finding this currently. No, these are people that knew Ellen White. Ellen White always had critics. Ellen White always had people that God was working with that saw the truth of what was happening. The tension, okay, that we're exploring today here with the thinking cup is, was Mrs. H correct? Was it true that what she saw was different than what Ellen White did? Did Ellen White practice what she preached on dress and adornment? Valid question. Now, Ellen White repeatedly, this is not a one-time occurrence, Ellen White repeatedly urged abstinence. She specifically focused on women, specifically, okay, to dress plainly, to practice what she called economy, and and we're going to talk about money in just a second, but she also said to redirect resources towards the mission. Now, when she says the mission, okay, it's the mission of the cult. It's the mission of the movement. It's the mission of not the gospel. It's the mission of her movement. It's the mission of the Advent flock. That's the mission that she's referring to. So here we are in 1861, and she says this. This is Testimonies to the Church. She says, I believe Sabbath keepers should dress plainly and study economy in dress. Those who wish to talk will talk, though we give them no occasion. I do not expect to suit every taste in regard to dress, but I believe it to be my duty to wear durable clothing, to dress neatly and orderly and suit my own taste. If it does not disagree, here we go, if it does not disagree with the Word of God. Now, I'm going to be very transparent here. The Word of God does not talk much about dress, okay? I don't think Ellen White studied her Bible much. I think she just quoted things. I think she just stole from other people's writings. But I can't find a whole lot of dress-related things that the Word of God, like, unless you're wanting to dress like Greco-Roman or like Israelites or Jews or like, there's not a whole lot of documented items that regards dress in the Word of God, okay? So let's move to her next statement. Now, this is 1894. where she's speaking about children. When children see those who are older in years self-pleasing, gratifying their own impulse, right? So she's talking like, hey guys, when you're older and your kids see you or your grandkids see you, that's what she's kind of referring to. Gratifying, their own impulses, their love for dress, and talking of hats, there you go, hats and dress adornment, what they shall wear to make them look nice. They catch the spirit when mere children and ape grown up people. If that isn't a racist comment, I don't know what is. But anyways, let's keep rolling. Okay, who wonder where their children got all these ideas of love for fine things. It was from their parents and older professed Christians. God pity us all, for we need converting. I want you to notice the language. We need converting. It's almost, just catch it, she's including herself in it. It's almost as if Ellen White had some sort of subconscious kind of prick. Okay? Some sort of conscious prick of like, yeah, I need to be concluded in this, including herself among, this is 1894, okay, among the older professed Christians who love fine things. Now, I'm going to show you that she actually loved fine things. Okay, I'm going to show you that as we get through this. Let's look at some other quotes here. Moving to 1907. 1907. This is less than 10 years before she passes away. Now, I put this at the very top. I want you to pay attention before I read the article. I want you to pay attention to this right here. If you read earlier in this quote, you're going to find that she actually says in the quote, I have a message from the Lord to all our church. This is one of those things where you can't like, oh, Mike, you're taking it out of context. Oh, that's not really what. No. In Ellen's mind, she believed that this was directly from God. And she says this. My sisters, do not spend your money needlessly for dress, but dress plainly. Remember that, dress plainly. Fathers and mothers, educate your children to dress inexpensively. Teach them to save their pennies for missionary work. Let every member of the family practice self-denial. Now, that is going to be a common occurrence. Okay, let's keep moving. My brethren and sisters, you must be willing to be converted yourself in order to practice the self-denial of Christ. Now, she's connecting. Whew, my voice is going out. She is connecting self-denial with following Christ, with clothing. Dress plainly, but neatly. Spend as little as possible upon yourselves. Keep in your homes a self-denial box. I'm going to point this out again. This is I have a message from the Lord. So understand that if you were hearing this from Ellen White and you believed her to be the messenger of God, this is not just hey, this is just your opinion. It's pastoral advice. This is from God. Keep in your homes a self-denial box into which you put the money saved by little acts of self-denial. 1911. Do not feel that you must follow every prevailing fashion, but dress plainly and neatly. Deny self, that money may flow in. Deny self, so that money flows into. Trace the money and you'll find the issue. Flows into the treasury for the advancement of the message. Now, what is the message that she's referring to? This is not like the advancement of the gospel. This is her message. This is the three angels message. This is the Ellen White Advent Movement message. Put all your money into our message so that we can advance the cause. Now, all the way back in 1885, okay, and Scotty, I agree 100%. It's always an awkward interaction. It makes me shudder when I read that previous quote, where it explicitly talks about flowing into the treasury, and that treasury is obviously their coffers. Okay, in 1885, she says this. This is in the Review and Herald. Cut down selfish indulgences at your tables and dress plainly. You notice the common recurrence, right? With the great and grand object before you of having money to place in the treasury of God. You may thus be, here we go, this sounds like a Benny Hinn move. You can be the means of advancing the cause, enlightening those who are in darkness of error. Okay. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is this, if you caught it. The bottom line is skip the fancy clothes, don't spend all the money for that, and instead have a jar that you save all the money that you normally would have spent on the fancy clothes and send that to the church. Send that to me. Now we're to talk about tithe later on today. Yeah, and it wasn't just like send it to the church. Like Ellen White got people's tithes. Oh yeah. Now she is absolutely going to escalate this in a vision. Now, she gets a vision in, this is back, okay, we've looked at some fairly recent to her, closer to the end of her death, near the end of her life. We're going to go all the way back to 1868 here. Now, she gets a vision. And in that vision, now why do I say vision? Well, it says right here, I was shown. You can't take this out of context. I was shown that the people of God should not imitate the fashions of the world. Keep that in your mind, the fashions of that age, okay? Because we're going to trace, did Ellen White, did she imitate the fashions of the day? Interesting. Back to the quote. Some have done this and are fast losing the peculiar holy character which should distinguish them as God's people. I was pointed, this is supposedly directly from God, I was pointed back to God's ancient people and was led to compare their apparel with the mode of dress in the last days. Huh? So I just question, what does their dress back in the ancient world have to do with modern days? Just side thing, okay? Well, let's just keep moving. This is 1868. Again, as soon as any have a desire to imitate the fashions of the world, that they do not immediately subdue, just as soon God ceases to acknowledge them as his children. Guys, I want you to pause for a second. This should literally tick you off. This is a shown by God moment in which if you're wearing certain clothes, Ellen White's claiming that you're no longer acknowledged as a child of God. This is demonic junk. This is mind control. This is brainwashing. And the common Adventist rebuttal is going to be like, oh, you're just taking it out of context. That is hogwash. That is, you know what? This is what Adventists like to do right here. This right here. By the way, this is a book that I just recently picked up. Okay. This is what Adventists like to do. They like to just stick their head in the ground and hope no one's paying attention. Ostriches and canary. By the way, this is written by an Adventist historian. I'll let you know how it is as I read through it. Just got started. This is evil stuff. Okay, this is junk. This is not the gospel related items, guys. This what we're looking at right here. When we see this, they are the children of the world and of darkness. Just as soon as God ceases to acknowledge them as his children because they're not wearing something. When this happens, this language, I'm going to be very clear. Friends, this language is salvational level language. That's what's going on here. That's what's happening. Even though she's not saying salvation, for God to look at what you're wearing and deem you as no longer as a child of God. It's horrible. This is evil. This is demonic. It's salvational level language. No wonder people felt like they had to listen to her. They were duped into this by fear, manipulation, and cult-related activity. This is a cult. Now, I want to recap a few things that we've looked at so far. The first thing I want to be very clear on, okay? Women, this is a recap. Women who love non-plain dresses, non-plain hats, adornment. She states that they need converting. Secondly, money, if you give money for fine hats, we're going to talk about that in just a second, you should do that because it's better for you to, remember those places you're supposed to kind of put it aside, right? The self, what did she call them? She called them, I'm having a mind error here for a second. What did she call them? She called them self-denial boxes. Okay, put these self-denial boxes out, and if you want to buy a hat, don't do it. Put it in the box and send it to us. I feel like I'm watching a TV show. The other thing she talked about is copy fashion. If you copy fashion, and this is the last thing we looked at, this is what this passage is saying. If you copy fashion, you lose your holy character. And you potentially lose your standing with God. Now, keep that in the back of your mind. Keep it in the back of your mind because up until, this is where it gets fun, okay? This is where it gets real fun. This is where it gets spicy. There was a photo of Ellen White that was long unknown. I mean, when I say long, it went unknown for about 109 years. No one knew about this photo until it was recently discovered just about a decade ago. It was discovered. It was finally published in October, roughly around October 2014. Now, you might have already seen this photo, okay, if you've done any research. But this was unknown. This was finally a photo that was discovered. It was actually discovered by Malazaras, October 9, 2014. It was taken, there was some research done on this by an Adventist researcher, and it was found out that it was taken May of 1905. That's where that bottom number, I'm going to take off the comments for a section so you can see this. 1905 is this picture. It was actually taken at the General Conference session in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Ellen White there in the middle. We're going to analyze this for a second. Ellen White in the middle was 77 years old. She's alongside her son on the left-hand side, who is W.C. White. It's Willie White. And on the right-hand side of her is her daughter-in-law by the name of May. Now, what is she wearing? What are they wearing? Let's talk about this for a second. What is she wearing? She's wearing what's called an Edwardian hat. That's an Edwardian hat. Late 1890s to roughly around 1914. Okay, this was the craze. This was famous fashion. Okay, the 1890s into the early 1900s was the famous wide-brim hat era. The elegant designs, the intricate embellishments, all that stuff. Okay. These time periods was the epitome of elegance and extravagance during the Victorian era. Okay, this was not plain. In fact, these clothes right here were not plain. They were not thrifty. They were 100% fashion statements. 100%. Now, also what is visible here is I want you to notice that her entire face and part of her head is actually showing. Now that's important. You might be like, "Oh, silly Mike, you're just making fun of this stuff." Okay? No, I'm not. I'm intentionally showing you this because it's going to contradict an 1859 testimony. Now remember what she said. If one thing I write about dress contradicts, if one thing. Okay? Now, what was her statement? Well, her statement in 1859 related to what she called the small bonnets. She talked about small bonnets exposing the face and the head that showed a lack, she called it a lack of modesty. This is 18, I believe actually this is 18, this may be actually 1859. I could have the date wrong on that. It could be 1868. Check my dating on that. I could be wrong on the date on the bottom. It might be 1859. But here's what she says. If God's professed people had not greatly departed from him, there would not be a marked difference between their dress and that of the world. Now pay attention. The small bonnets exposing the face and head show a lack of modesty. The hoops are a shame. The inhabitants of earth are growing more and more corrupt, and the line of distinction between them and the Israel of God must be more plain, or the curse which falls upon worldlings will fall on God's professed people. Goodness gracious. So, here you go. Is that a bonnet that shows her face? Is Ellen White this is 1905, okay? Is she contradicting her own statement here? Now, I want to share something with you, and this is just for fun. I know that AI right now is kind of some people love it, some people hate it. I took this picture and I loaded this picture into the AI and I asked it to analyze the outfits of each of these individuals. I wanted to know what they were. I wanted to know the era that it was in. I wanted to know the rough cost in today's dollars, as well as kind of roughly. Now, this is AI. Okay, you're welcome to go check this. You're welcome to go see. Okay, what you will find is if you look up the details of these particular outfits, these outfits per person ranges from anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 in today's dollars. These are not cheap outfits. These are not cheap outfits, friends. Okay, on the left. Okay, On Ellen's left, okay, we have May on your right, on Ellen's left. May is wearing an even more elaborate, decorated, what's called a trimmed hat. Now, my question is this, okay? Did she catch the spirit of high fashion from her mother-in-law? It's a question, right? Now, Ellen very specifically rebuked others that adorn in hats. In fact, if you go to this should be a quote here. This is 3 years after this. I'm sorry, you can't make this up. Okay, this image is from 1905. This is 1905. Okay, so pay attention to the quote on the screen. This is 1908. Okay. This is in a compilation book called Evangelism, but it was published in 1908. She explicitly says, your hats and dresses need not the extra trimmings that are put upon them. You are to be clothed with modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety. Give to the world a living illustration of the inward adorning of the grace of God. Let our sister dress plainly, as many do, having the dress of good material, durable, modest, appropriate for this age, and let not the dress question fill the mind. Well, the dress question does fill my mind. It absolutely fills my mind. Okay? Now, one thing that's important to understand, okay, as we're working through this, one thing that's really important to understand about this image is there are very few images of Ellen White where she's not in a studio. This is a candid shot. This is a very rare image. Very rare. So did she listen to herself? Now, I'm gonna say a few other things about this. There's one more detail that if you are up on Victorian age, you will notice. Ellen, as well as Willie White, Ellen is also wearing what's called a pince-nez glasses. Pince-nez. These are it's a stylish, aristocratic nose spectacle is what it is. And the purpose of this was made popular in Europe. The purpose of it, I think it's actually French. The purpose of it was to signal refinement and status. That's what it deals with. Okay. Now, we can't see from this image, but many times these glasses, because they deal with status, they have gold frames. If it had gold frames, it was highly expensive. It was very, very pricey. Okay. We don't know if it's gold because we can't see in the image, but we absolutely know that all three of these were signifying that they were sophisticated. Now, this image isn't exactly, remember what she said, I was shown that you should have a self-denial box. Okay. Ellen, did you have a self-denial box? What is this? What are these things? Why are you wearing these in front of, again, we know this is at a general conference. It's not like she's just going out and kind of doing casual work. She's showing this off. She wants people to see her. It's a status symbol. And from a purely visual standpoint, okay, if you just look at this picture from a visual standpoint, 1905, this photo should sit very uncomfortably when you position it next to the testimonies of plainness, modesty, avoid the ornate dress. You should sacrifice, like all these things. Okay. So let's kind of line all of this up. Let's kind of recap and reflect on some of this for a second. Here's what we know Ellen White said. Here's what we explicitly know that she said. Her quotes. Okay. If I write one thing and act another, I'm a hypocrite. She said that. And she explicitly says it in a quote connected to dress, if we're trying to keep it in context. Okay. The second thing we know, she taught that imitating fashionable dress endangers your standing with God. She explicitly talks about that. Okay, these are her quotes that we put on the screen. She also told members to avoid extra trimmings on hats and send the money to the treasury. Well, the question here would be, okay, let's put this back on the screen. Why didn't you send this money to the treasury, Ellen? That is an honest question. If I was during that day and I saw her and I knew that she had said these things, I would have an honest gut response that would say, wow, you guys are really kind of flaunting your status here. Why wouldn't you give that money to the cause and help? I mean, this is the equivalent in this picture right here. This is the equivalent of roughly in today's dollars, $4,000 to $6,000 is represented right here. So now, and again, in this particular image, it's very clear. What do we have? We have a photo, very clear photo. This is documented evidence, 1905, where she's wearing elegant Edwardian hats, a scarf, which many of you have already notated is more than likely, I'm not going to say absolutely, it's more than likely an actual animal. Okay, it's fur. Okay, these are not like they didn't have like faux fur back then. Okay, it's not what happened during that time period. But we have clearly an Edwardian hat, Edwardian scarf. You have status signaling glasses. You have highly expensive, outfits, and they're flaunting some sort of status. Now, what's the pattern? Okay, this is episode 6. This is episode 6. What is the pattern? When we looked at the episode on fiction, what was the status? She said explicitly, put away every novel, but what did she do? She herself clipped and preserved fiction, novels, and she promoted those in her collections. So that was with regards to fiction. Now, what about drugs? What did she say? She said, don't touch. She said, touch not opium. That's a quote from her. Don't touch opium. But yet, she herself had in her home, this is not me making this up, friends. She kept and she dispensed laudanum, which is a cholera mixture, which we exclusively know had opium in it. The very thing she told other people not to touch. And now that we come into dress, okay, and we're going to move into the last segment, but now that we're in dress, what does she say? She's telling everyone else, dress plainly, make sacrifices, don't imitate fashion, don't do all these things, sacrifice in these self-denial boxes, give all your money extra, dress plainly, give all the extra money into the coffers of the church to actually advance their cause. But yet, whoops, we have a candid photograph that shows her wearing very clearly modern Edwardian style headwear, clothes, all the stuff. So my question for those of you that are in the chat, okay, my question is this. It's simple. You're being presented with the evidence. You're the ones that can go read these quotes, okay? I'm not trying to bring a bias to the conversation. I want you to look at the evidence. The question is this: is she a hypocrite? Or is this just silly Mike, human inconsistency, or, well, it's just the historical context. There's nothing going on. And another thing that I think that we need to bring up, does the severity of the warnings, like when she addresses people and she says things like God ceases to acknowledge them because of what their dress is. Okay, you saw the quote. Doesn't that kind of make the double standard feel even heavier? I mean, it'd be one thing if you weren't proclaiming that you were a prophetess or that you were getting these messages from God. That'd be one thing. If you were just kind of, hey, I think that this is Christian behavior. But the fact that she says what she says about herself, doesn't that make the severity of the warnings even worse? All right. Now, I don't want you all to forget some of these things as we exit out, okay? I'm just going to fire a few quotes. We've already looked at these. I don't want you to miss these. Her direct quotes. God pity us all, for we need converting. Specifically towards dress. Keep in your homes a self-denial box. Do not feel that you must follow every prevailing fashion. I was shown that the people of God should not imitate the fashions of the world, and yet she's imitating the fashions of the world. And don't forget that she said, if I write one thing that I don't follow with regards to dress, that I'm a hypocrite. And the last two things I want you to remember as we exit into the next conversation of the show. As soon as any have a desire to imitate the fashions of the world, God ceases to acknowledge them as his children. This is demonic. As soon as someone desires something of the world, God leaves you. So here's the question. If imitating the fashions of the world, if that's true, if that risks your standing with God, if Ellen White is true, if we take her at her word, what do we do? Like, what do we honestly do with this picture? What should you do with this picture? If her statement is true, imitating the fashions of the world, if that risks your standing with God, what do you do with a 77-year-old Ellen White at a general conference session that, whoops, you got caught? What do you do? Now, I want to talk as we exit out. We're in the last part. We're in the final third of the conversation, and this is going to be the most intense of the conversation today. This is dealing with financial matters. We are going to fire through things that friends, I want you to study this stuff. I do not want you to take my word for this. Please study this stuff. But as we get into this, I want to put on the screen a quote from Ellen that I think we need to keep at the forefront. This is the end of her life. 1908, she makes a conversation. It's really interesting to me that she makes these statements as if it's a pricked conscience. She makes the statement as if she knows that she needs to say this because she feels kind of like a hypocrite, okay? So she says this: God would have us learn almost how deep is his hatred and contempt for all hypocrisy and deception. Now, I fundamentally believe that Scripture supports. You look at the Pharaoh of Egypt. God used the hardening of Pharaoh's heart for the will of God. Fully believe that God uses people that are doing what they're doing for the honor and glory of him, whether it's good or bad. Ultimately, it is all to honor him, and it brings him glory. I think that these quotes, this quote that we set up on the last one, is a truth, a small little piece, a glimpse into what Scripture supports. Jesus spoke very vehemently against hypocrisy. The apostles spoke against hypocrisy and false teachings. The early church fathers spoke in the early writings spoke against hypocrisy. So in this last part of the episode, we're going to be tracing this kind of common theme, this concept, this keep this hypocrisy and deception in your mind as you're tracing, as we walk through the footsteps of Ellen White in her financial, money, mission, and moral authority as we walk through her life. The financial counsel that Ellen White gives to her followers. This sell everything, simplify down, minimalize your life, shun debt, prioritize the treasury of God, which really was just her own pockets. I'll show you what I mean by that. So keep all of that alongside the record that we have. It's very clearly documented of her property acquisitions, her own debts, her own handling of tithe. Now, we're going to keep every cited quote intact. We're gonna be intent. I want you to take screenshots, read, cite, research. Okay. Here's the question. The question is this: as we move into the money segment, did the money culture that Ellen White preached, that she proposed, did the Ellen White culture match the money practices that she, as well as the denomination, embraced? Is that what happened? Now, I need to set a little bit of a baseline here. I want to just set up kind of the baseline of what she claimed publicly. There was a couple of things that she said. We've already seen her statement about self-denial as kind of family practice. We saw the quote just a minute ago about this, like, I was shown that you should keep a self-denial box at home. Save the pennies for the cause, dress plainly, like all that stuff, right? The other common theme that you find, again, in the quotes that we've already read, it was sacrifice for the mission. You need to sacrifice your life for the mission. And when we say mission, it's her mission. It's Three Angels' message. It's the spreading of the Adventist gospel. In other words, it's prioritize, in her words, what's called the treasury of God over your own personal comforts. Sacrifice for God, because by sacrificing, you can spur the coming of Christ faster. And I know many of you that either are currently Adventists or have been Adventists that are watching. I'm sure you felt that. You've been told that. I was told that. The third thing I want to bring up is there's this theme of stewardship with moral weight. So misuse of funds, okay, was framed as a spiritual failure. It was even phrased as disobedience of God. If you mishandled God's money in a certain way, then it was considered spiritual failure in Ellen White's eyes. Now, that's a pretty high bar. It's a pretty high sacrificial bar. If you grew up Adventist, you have probably heard versions of this in stewardship series. In fact, it usually comes out, it's pretty common in Adventist churches to come out every January. Usually January, the new year or the fiscal year, you're going to hear these episodes, right, that pop up about giving money and sacrificing. And at times it can feel a little bit like God is blessing you if you give to him. It's a little bit of this interesting engagement with stewardship. Now, I also need to update you. This is just setting the background history, okay? We're going to get to the quotes in just a second. But the background history for Ellen White's income. I don't know if you spent much time thinking about where did her income come from. So these are pretty concrete items, okay? Ellen White earned book royalties. She earned royalties from her books, things like Testimonies, Desire of Ages, Steps to Christ, several others. She earned an income from the royalties from her books. She also had publishing arrangements. There were times when manuscripts where she was given money in advance. Okay, there was like this debt finance, or for the purpose of a certain project, a certain writing project, or it was some sort of it was a project that was promoted by the denomination itself, and so she would be advanced, money. Publishing arrangements is what this would follow. Okay. The third area, she actually had she had speaking and travel support. Now, she wasn't necessarily paid to go speak per se. Okay, that's not really what I'm talking about here. She was supported by the church for all of her travel expenses, her speaking expenses. All of that came from the coffers of the church, okay, entities or donors. And you're going to see some of this as we get into her money, okay? The last kind of category is property and her estate. She amassed a huge estate, a massive estate. She was wealthy. Do not fall for the Adventist narrative that she was just a poor, sacrificial, uneducated, blah, 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 poor little girl. Don't fall for that. We're going to show you unequivocally the evidence of this tonight. Now, my questions are this. All of her income streams that we're talking about, a couple of questions. Were these terms transparent? Do you know about these terms? Do you know where her income was coming from, what she was doing with the money? Were the profits modest? Were they substantial? I want you to be asking yourself these questions as you go through this evidence, okay? Did these profits sit comfortable if you were sitting in the office in the audience listening to sermons or speaking engagements about self-denial? Would it have sat with you well, okay? If a spiritual leader, I'm calling her that, if a prophetess, okay, if a prophetess that claimed that she was getting this information from God, if she is urging you maximum sacrifice as a follower, what kind of financial transparency would you expect in return? How would you feel if you found out some of the things that you're going to be finding out tonight? Now, we're going to start our deep dive in 1849. In Maine, this is 1849, in Maine, the Whites needed funding for the ministry. And there is a solemn warning that goes out. The time of trouble is near. This is 1849. Remember, this is just 5 years after the Great Disappointment, okay? The time of trouble is near. Homes, lands should be sold. Dedicate to the cause. Give up everything. Okay. Ellen White publishes. This is a vision. This is a vision that gets published, and there's a very clear urgency that goes out. And here's what's said: about 1 week since the Lord showed me in vision that houses and lands will be of no use in the time of trouble, and that in that time they could not be disposed of. Side note, interjection. It's almost like, oh crap, you're not going to get rid of your home, so you're going to need to get rid of them now, because you're not going to need them. So sell them now, give to the cause. All right, go back to the quote. I saw, this is from God, I'm not taking this out of context. I saw that it was the will of God that the saints should cut loose from every encumbrance, dispose of their houses and lands, because the time of trouble comes, and thus make a covenant with God by sacrifice. I saw they would sell if they laid their property on the altar and earnestly inquired for duty. God will teach them when to dispose of these things. Then they will be free in the time of trouble and have no clogs to weigh them down. Now, I want you just use your brains for a second. This is 5 years after the Great Disappointment. Now, I get a common response from Adventist apologists. She never gave a time period that Jesus was coming. She didn't time set. She didn't date set. She didn't this. She didn't that. Like, you can't state that about her. Well, she's getting a directive here. I want you to pay attention to what she's saying. She is getting a directive from God that you are to sell your homes because you're not going to need it in the time of trouble. Now, do you think that she got from God that this was going to be, oops, God's not going to come for 100 and some years? Like, friends, it's 2025. This is, in another 24 years, this will be 200 years. So I want to tell Adventist apologists, don't come at me with this, oh, she didn't date set. She supposedly got from God that back in 1849 that they were to sell their homes. That means everyone that lived during that time were going to experience the time of trouble. Sell the homes. That's the context. If you use your brain and you think about what's going on, that is the context. Now, in the summer of 1849, this quote came in 1849. In the summer of 1849, cholera breaks out. It ravaged the American cities. It just ravaged America. Ellen White read it was a sign. She actually claimed that it was a sign, that cholera was a sign within Matthew 24's beginning of sorrows context. Okay, she reads into this, and here's what she says. Okay, this is dealing with this time period. She's pressing this point of vivid language here. What we have seen and heard of the pestilence, she's talking about the cholera outbreak, is but the beginning of what we shall see and hear. Soon the dead and dying will be all around us. I saw that some will be so hardened as to even make sport of the judgments of God. Then the slain of the Lord will be from one end of the earth to the other. They will not be lamented, gathered, nor buried, but their ill savor will come up from the face of the whole earth. Those only who have the seal of the living God, aka they're Adventists, will be sheltered from the storm of the wrath that will soon fall on the heads of those who have rejected the truth. Now, again, I'm going to ask you guys to use your minds. This is 1849. What did she claim the truth was? This is the Advent truth. This is not like, oh, those who don't believe the gospel. This is the Advent truth. And if you don't have the seal of God, meaning in 1849, if you don't believe in Sabbath, you don't have the seal of God, you're screwed. And all these dead people are going to be all over the world. All over the world. And no one's going to lament them. No one's going to gather them. No one's going to bury them. They're just going to be dead. Oops. Almost 200 years has gone by and we're still moving along. Now, this particular session is not on false prophecies or conditional prophecies. As like, I get so tired of Adventists claiming that these are conditional prophecies. That's not what's going on. But sorrow, specifically, as it relates to what's happening here, okay? What she's referring to. Sorrow seemingly underway. Some likely sold. Now, what would have happened if you heard that? They're going to sell their homes, right? They're going to sell their properties. They're going to put funds to the work. This is talk about an altar call. Give all your money. Put your home on the altar. Sacrifice. Now, when the epidemic passed and peace and prosperity followed, which happened, many of these individuals that sold their farms and their property and their agriculture, all the stuff that they had to sustain their lives, they were left to simply rent and live with relatives. That's what happened. They had no equity. This was a horrible financial decision. Why? Because it wasn't coming from God. This was not from God. This is a demon that was telling people to do this. This is a false statement. Now we're going to go through some slides. Okay, we're going to move through some items. We're going to talk about, as we're exiting out of the cholera outbreak, we're going to talk about what did Ellen White do. Okay, remember, everyone sell 1849. Get rid of them. Put them on the altar. Get rid of them. And then what happens? The pandemic kind of calms down. Prosperity begins to kick up. And you're going to notice Ellen White changes her tune. Surprise, surprise. What do we have? 1855. The Whites have now secured a 1.5 acre lot in Battle Creek. And then in 1856, they build and they move into the home. Now, the earlier vision that she had, remember this is 1855, the earlier vision, 1849, sell homes and lands. This should raise a big question, okay? This should raise a huge question. Now, this is the two images here, okay? The top one is an older image. The bottom one is a much more recent image. You'll see it's actually kind of idolized as the historic grounds because it's actually, this is a current image, a reasonably current image. So I want you to pay attention, okay, that as we move through this, she answers, like if you were in 1855, 6 years after she made the 1849, and you saw that she purchases a home, okay, if you were using your brain, you actually would go, wait a second, there's something wrong with that, right? So what happens? She corrects her previous statement. 1857, she comes down. Now she sees something different. I saw that at present God did not call. Oops. Did not call for the houses of his people that need to be lived in. Useless, expensive house. Oh, it's just the expensive homes. Just the expensive homes are exchanged for cheaper ones. You're supposed to sell off the expensive, give the equity to the church. But if those who have of their abundance do not hear his voice and cut loose from the world and dispose of a portion of their property and lands and sacrifice, he will pass them by. If they don't do that, God's going to pass you by. And he's going to call for those who are willing to do anything for Jesus, even to sell their homes to meet the wants of the cause. God will have a free will offering. Those who give must esteem it a privilege to do so. I want you to notice, okay, this is a little less than 10 years later after she said, God said, sell it. Now it's like, no. God didn't show me that you needed to get rid of your home. Just if you had an expensive home. Just if you have an expensive home. Then you're supposed to sell. Now, after the whites settle into this house, it was apparently no longer necessary for their followers to cut loose. Okay. Oh, no, it's okay. As long as it's a home that's not extravagant, okay? As long as you're just living in it, it's nothing crazy. Okay? Now, she changes her approach very clearly, okay? She changes her approach. I want you to notice this is the one we looked at was 18, what was it? It was 18, let me look back once. That was 1857, okay? What we're looking at next is actually a newer statement, 1851, and this is taken from an old document, a sketch of the Christian experience and views of Ellen G. White. Now, I know it's a little bit blurry on the screen, but I want you to notice what she says. This is literally 2 years after she said, okay, that the homes were supposed to be sold. I saw that houses and lands would be of no use to the saints in the time of trouble. This is in 1851. For they would then have to flee from their possessions before infuriated mobs. And at that time, they would not be disposed of to advance the cause. I was shown that it was the will of God that the saints should cut loose from the very encumbrance before the time of trouble comes and make a covenant with God by sacrifice. If they have their property on the altar and earnestly inquire of God for duty, he will teach them when to dispose of these things. Then they will be free in the time of trouble. Again, pay attention. Okay? She saw this stuff. This is not a like, I think, maybe you should. Now, the 1849 instruction that then gets popped up here in 1851, okay? This instruction ends up fading out of print after 1856 when she makes that statement, okay, that, oh, no, God showed me that, like, you can have homes, but just not expensive homes. And if you have an expensive home, you should sell it, put the equity back into the church. Okay? There was no longer ever a print again that talked about the selling of homes after 1856. Now, in 1868, Ellen is going to rebuke. This is this 18? Yep, no, this is 1856. Okay, this is very close to the time period. Okay, she is going to talk about adding. Can't make this stuff up. 1856. Okay, here's what she says. This is in the Testimonies to the Church. I have been shown. Again, this is a vision. It's not just her opinion. I have been shown that God's people who profess to believe present truth are not in a waiting, watching position. They are increasing in riches. Remember, she bought a home. They're increasing in riches, increasing in riches, and are laying up their treasures upon the earth. They are becoming rich in worldly things, but not rich toward God. They do not believe in the shortness of time. Again, this, I get, is not a time setting, but come on, friends. If she believed it was shortness of time, and then it's 100 and some years later, and God still hasn't come, that's not the shortness of time in her time period. They do not believe that the end of all things is at hand in her time period, right then, that Christ is at the door. They may profess much faith, but they deceive their own souls, for they will act out all the faith that they really possess. Their works show the character of their faith. There's another aspect of her salvation model. Their works show the character of their faith and testify to those around them that the coming of Christ is not to be in this generation. So, side note, it's very clear that she believed that you were a part of, you spurred on Christ's coming. Like, Christ doesn't have a time period that he's going to come. He decides based on your own faith and your own work if he's going to come in your generation. According to their faith will be their works. Their preparation are being made to remain in this world. Here's the quote that I want you to pay. Here's the part. They are adding houses to house to house, and land to land, and are citizens of this world. This is 18. This may actually be 1868. I may be wrong on the date. I'm a little bit leery to say it's 1856. Okay. But notice that we have what happens in 1867. Ellen. 1867 comes along, and what does she do? May 2, 1867, what does she do? She buys another home. The Whites move into this. It's a large farmhouse in Greenville, Michigan, where they significantly upsize. Now, the record shows, okay, this is 1867. The documented records show that they purchased a second home in Washington, Iowa, which is referenced as early as, this is 1867, the Washington, Iowa home is as early as 1870, possibly 1871. Here's the reference. This is mentioned in a letter in 1870 as well as a letter in 1871. This here is 1870 where it says, we shall calculate to spend 2 or perhaps 3 weeks before the camp meeting in our Iowa home. We shall leave here from Greenville. There you go. They're living in Greenville, Michigan. That's the home I just showed you. And they're going to their home in Iowa. That's 2 homes currently. Okay? To remain. Now, we also see here that they sold this home, this specific home, is sold in 1875. Now, this citation is from Gerald Wheeler. So he's a historian that's writing on the history of James White, and he states that in 1875, he sold the home in Iowa and Michigan for less than he could have received. So he kind of sold it for a loss. Okay, but what does he do with the sale? Now, I want you to notice. Okay, I'm going to go back here to this previous image. Okay. There's the home that one of the homes they sold. We don't have the image of the home in Iowa. And now, what do we have? They sold the home and they upsized to an elegant Italianate mansion in Oakland, California. This is in Oakland, California. And this is an editorial note. Okay, this is an editorial note here. That's why it's in brackets. The publishers are noting on this. On March 22, James White left Oakland, where they had just built a home for a special session of the General Conference in Battle Creek. So they left their home, they went back to Battle Creek. By the way, travel was not cheap. He and his wife were separated for 66 days until they met again on May 27 at the Kansas camp meeting. During this period, she wrote her husband almost every day and occasionally to others. So that was the compiler. Now, this is a 2-story, okay? It's a 2-story Gregorian-style home that's near Healdsburg. It's on 25 acres, and they purchased it for roughly $1,600. Now, that might not seem like a lot of money, okay, but $1,600 during 1877 was a lot of money, okay? If you do any research as to the modern day kind of equivalents or the time period of the day, you're going to notate, you're going to find in the records, this is actually in the museum records of the Heldsburg Museum, and you can find it on this website. It's actually the planning division for the permits of Sonoma County, where they actually document historical evidence, okay? They document that in 1877, with James in ill health, the Whites purchased the former William Melton two-story vernacular Gregorian-style home at 1950 West Dry Creek Road, hoping that rural semi-retirement in the mild climate would restore his health. James, however, died in 1881, a couple of years later, and Ellen and her son William became involved in establishing the Seventh Adventist College in Healdsburg. Now, this is in California, okay? So this home currently, if you look up on Zillow today, this property, now it's not 25 acres, it's been downsized to about 12 acres. This property, depending on kind of what happens, this is multiple millions in today's dollars. Okay, this property is expansive. It is beautiful. There's a vineyard on it today. Okay, it's somewhere between $3 to $4 million is the value of it today. Okay, modern evaluation. Now, in 1880. In 1880, a 16-room home, yes, you heard me right, a 16-room home, it's a 3-story Italiante mansion near Battle Creek with roughly 30 acres. There's like 200 fruit trees. It's well beyond the modest house, typically portrayed in denominational memory, okay? We get these references, okay, to the amount of and I want to reference here as we go through this, okay, a little bit of the backdrop to what's happening, okay. This is a letter to Lucinda. If you don't know, Lucinda is her best friend, like literally best friend. I almost put in today's conversation some of the private conversations between Lucinda and her, and I decided not to. But she says this, Lucinda, I want to consult you. We shall not come back to Oakland at present. The attitude of Mary and sister has worried me and unfitted me for anything. I will not expose myself to any connection with them. We have found a beautiful retired place in, there we go, Heldsburg. 15 acres of land for $1,400. Again, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Okay, we will have here Greenville and Colorado combined. Ooh, we got multiple properties going on here. I just want you to notice this. Okay, now this is all while, okay, now this is, let's see here. I want to make sure that I'm getting this document right here. This is, I'm looking at my notes here real quick. This is the Heldsburg. I want you to see some additional quotes here. I wish you could just run up and see me. This is Lucinda, okay? There's a little poorhouse on the place with a good, now, notice she says a little poorhouse, okay? She always kind of minimizes what the reality was. With a good fireplace, we could live in this shanty till we build a good place, dwelling home. We shall, we think, settle this matter at once. The farm must be attended to at once, made ready for crops. This place is the most romantic, equal to, notice, equal to Colorado, and some portions as subdued as Greenville. So we're in a situation, okay? We're in a situation where we have, we clearly have multiple homes going on. Now, as we move into, I want you to see some of these homes. This is the property in Hellsberg Museum. Okay, these are 1950 image taken. This is actually in 1983. Another image that's taken just to show you kind of the context of what's going on. Now, in 1880, okay, I want to go back to 1880 real quick. In 1880, we have something kind of pop up. I want to go to, we have something. Now this is actually a year before, because remember, James White passed away in 1881. Okay, in 1880, we have his dream home. This is James's dream home. Okay, the final home we owned was a 16-room, 3-story brick Italiante mansion on the road to Cogwack Lake, about 1.5 miles from the center of Battle Creek. The 30-acre estate had woods on 10 acres and an orchard of more than 300 fruit trees. He paid $6,000. $6,000 for it. That is so much money, okay? But to raise the money, he had to sell his house in Oakland and Healdsburg, California. White advertised the Healdsburg property as well as Willie's Oakwood house in the signs of the time. Several times he wrote to Willie pleading that his son sell the houses as quickly as possible. Reading between the lines, one could get the impression that Ellen was urging Willie not to sell the property. Now, I don't know if that's because, she liked certain homes or not, or I don't really know exactly the reason why. That's kind of reading between the lines here. I want to just kind of finish out. This is evidence now that was a reference by a historian. This is actually from Ellen White to show this is exactly what's going on. Tonight, Father closes a trade with real estate agent Peavy for property on Cogwack Road. That brick house is sitting up so high, large with cupola. We rode up there one day and we decided it was just the place for the old folks. It is on a prominence overlooking all Battle Creek. We purchased about 30 acres. There is a large, young, thrifty orchard containing the best fruit and about 10 acres of oak grove. The house cost $8,000. It was built 10 years ago. Pretty new home. It has all the advantages of a country residence, and yet it is as near the city as from the office down. We think a road is on either side of us. The house is the most substantial, thoroughly built house I have ever seen. It has 3 stories. The partitions are of brick, but it is not built as we would build a house. It is cut up into many rooms. Now, we do not have an actual picture of this house. What I am going to show you is an 1882 built home, okay? That just again, they're telling you that this property, okay, was huge. I mean, 3 stories, massive orchard. Notice the price of the homes were going up, okay? So just pay attention to that. But here's an example. This is not the home, okay? This is a Victorian home. This is a Victorian home. This is not the Victorian home. This is not her home. This is a house that is a current picture of a house or similar to it, okay? It was built in 1862. This had 7 bedrooms, 2 baths. It had multiple other homes. Okay. So this is an example of what it might look like. Okay, this is an example. Now, I want to remind everyone as we're going into this. I want to remind everyone, this is her own documented evidence here. The home on the little farm on West Dry Creek Road was several miles from the town of Hellsburg. Mrs. White wanted to be close to the college. Remember? Early in August, she bought a 2-story house. That's the one we're talking about, Powell Street, which bordered the town. It stood on 2.5-acre tract. We've got multiple homes, okay? As the college's boarding house was under construction, her house was at once fitted up to board with the carpenters. A heavy yield of plums and peaches was canned from the college in the health retreat in St. Helena. Willie White reported that Mother engaged in this work with great interest, saying it in answers to our cautions that it was a rest to her weary brain. When she was on the West Coast, this was her home, until she went to Australia in 1891. Now, I want you to catch the interaction. I want you to catch what's happening here. We have multiple homes, okay? We have multiple homes that are going on. All while she's building her own estate. As she's building her own estate, and it's going to get larger and larger and larger. We're not done. What is she saying to everyone else? 1885, she says, those who are fastening their means in large homes and lands in worldly enterprises are saying by their actions, God cannot have it. I want it for myself. Come on. She has multiple homes, massive properties, huge acreage, 2, 3, sometimes 4 homes at a time, selling off 2 to buy another one. All while she's telling other people publicly, testimonies to the church publicly. She can't do that. 1887 again in the Review and Herald. It is time for those who have large possessions to cut down the principle that God's work may be extended. Interesting, Ellen. Interesting statement, Ellen. What about your own property? Hey, did you think about cutting down your own property and selling that so that you could extend kind of everything that was going on? Interesting, Ellen. Commence your selling and giving alms. Make no delay. This is 1888. God expects more of you than you have been willing to do. Apparently, she needs to upgrade. We call upon you who have means to inquire with earnest prayer, what is the extent of the divine claim upon me and my property? Should I sell it? There is work to be done. Apparently not with Ellen's money. We're going to get to her debt in just a second. Means must be invested in the work of saving souls, who, in turn, shall bring their offering to the treasury and win souls to the Lord. Okay. We ought now to be heeding the injunction of our Savior. Now, that's a strong statement. Okay, basically saying that God's telling us to do this. Sell. Sell that ye have and give alms. Sell your homes. It is now that our brethren should be cutting down their possessions instead of increasing them. Ellen, I thought do you see the hypocrisy here? And notice what she says. This is 1882. She apparently thinks that she's about ready to move into heaven. We are about ready to move. 1882, and she thinks they're about ready to move. The Lord's going to come. We're going to move to the better country, even a heavenly country. Then let us not be dwellers upon the earth, but be getting things into as compact a compass as possible. All while she continues to stack on her property. Her portfolio, her real estate portfolio is going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to increase. Now, here's where her increase is going. This is right around this time period. What happens? James White, this is before he dies. James White had determined that he and his wife would attend. This is from the autobiography written by Arthur White, her grandson. And what did they say? For he anticipated they would devote their time to writing as they resided comfortably in what was known as the White Ranch in the mountains of Colorado. There's another property. As it turned out, they attended more than 10 such gatherings. The adjusted summer program allowed them but a few days at their newly acquired Colorado home. Oh, that's interesting. All while, here we go, 1881. Let's follow the line, the crumb trail. I hope you will, by all means, come to Colorado as soon as possible. The business with Brother Hamilton must be squared up. Horse feed. It's a ranch, friends. It's a huge ranch. They have horses there. And there will be a great expense to keep the teams. Things have but left for 2 years in Brother Hamilton's hands. There is considerable property here to be looked after. This is not a small, cheap. This is a massive, it's called the White Ranch. Judge Russell talked to Brother Hamilton about exchanging our property in Colorado for some of his property in Battle Creek. Oh, here we go again. We're going to upgrade. Please look at his property before you come here. Now, in 1889, notice what happens. In anticipation of a concerted program of writing, this is from the biography, she had purchased this is a substantial home in Petoskey. This is Michigan. In the resort area of Lake Michigan, where she had spent 2 months the summer before. She was having a home built there. She just kept building homes. It's like everywhere she went, she wanted to have a house. Where she and her staff, now there you got a reference to her staff, could hide away and work. But meetings the brethren wished her to attend would involve several weeks. Now, from here, we have an interesting turn of events. Let's just keep walking through, okay? We have some interesting, this gets a little bit crazy. This is again in the autobiography. This is 1895. It says, our school interests demanded that we have land which could be cultivated, and 1,500 acres were purchased for that purpose. 1,500 acres! I have bought about 60 acres. Now, this is actually in Australia. This is when she gets kicked out. She goes to Australia. They send her across the world. 60 acres of this land, and have had a plain and Now, notice what she says. She says that it's plain and comfortable. When we came to this place about a year ago, the first of this month, it was a forest of trees and underbrush, such as seen in Colorado. So she's going to compare this to her interaction with Colorado. We have a large number of workmen. Hey, look at that. She's got a workforce. And they pitched 5 tents and went to work. They're going to build her a home. I could not be in 2 places at the same time, so I came up here with my family. Now, This home, okay, this, this ends up being an 11-bedroom, 2-story cottage. So when she says cottage, it's an 11-bedroom, 2-story property with additional attached service rooms. This is not when don't take the bait when Ellen White says, "Oh, 60 acres on a plain, comfortable cottage. Oh, we don't have much." Don't take that bait. Okay. 1895. Okay. 1895. Now, in the early 1900s, she's going to return. Okay, she's going to return to California. So Ellen is reported to have purchased 120 acres with a small house near St. Helena. And weeks later, she urges others. This is weeks later. She says this. Okay. I think this is the right quote here. She says, "Some may ask, surprise, surprise. Some may ask, why, if there is such need of money in the work, why did Sister White purchase a house and farm?" This is... Now, I need to set some backstage for this, okay? Because here's why this is happening in 1901. A year earlier, okay, she came into Elm Shaven, and she purchased in Napa Valley a 2-story ranch home on 74 acres in Napa Valley. It had a large veranda, multiple living spaces, handcrafted stairway, imported tile fireplaces. There was a basement. There was 8-room office building with a library and a vault, 2 cottages, a barn. This is a massive property. Okay, massive property. This is huge. This is Helmshaven, or Elms Haven, as many people say. I like to say Elmshaven because she was definitely shaving money. She was shaving money out of the coffers. Okay? But this property, it was almost like she was anticipating some backlash when she wrote this. Because she says, some people are asking, why, if there's such a need for the money, why did she make these purchases? Well, she responds, "Oh, this was not my plan. The Lord did this. The Lord placed this here. This is the Lord." Okay? We should not have had enough money to make the first payment, already buying things that they didn't have money for, only that the sanatorium purchased the land to the amount of $1,000. Oh, it's the Lord. Silly, silly, silly us. And what does she say? And when the Lord signifies that it is our duty to turn this place over to the sanatorium, will obey. Well, that's interesting. She says, "Oh, this was a God thing." But when it's God's time, I'll transfer it. Well, here's the funny thing. We know, documented evidence, that the transfer never happened. It never happened. In fact, after her death, the property was sold to non-Adventists, and then in 1927, an SDA by the name of Charles T. Everson repurchased this property in 1927, minus some of the land on the east side of the property, and his wife ended up turning this property over to the SDA Church in 1956. Now, shortly after, she pressed again that those with homes and lands should be disposing of them. What does she say? This is 1902. The time has come. Sell, dispose of your properties. Sell your properties. Seriously? And then we have in 1907, this is 8 years before she dies, she issues this very stern warning. They use his money in building houses and adding acre to acre solely for self-gratification. A just God will call them to account for misapplying his means, robbing his needy children of the necessaries of life in order to gratify their expensive tastes. Really, Ellen? Okay, Ellen. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about debt for a second as we exit out. We're going to rattle through the last few stuff, okay? Let's talk about some of the debts. Okay, has not the time come for those who have houses and lands to sell and give alms? This is 1900. She keeps telling them to dispose of the property, dispose of all this stuff. Now, interestingly, she gives guidance to her son. This is written to her son, Edson. And she says, I think sometimes you will... Now, I want you to take on this as if you were Ellen's son. This is a very stern warning. I think sometimes you will never be qualified to manage business at all yourself, for you do not show wisdom and judgment in any of your management, in anything you engage in. You are hopeful and lay large plans, spread yourself as though doing a big thing. Imagine you want everything an experienced workman intending to engage in and carry on a large business would want. Buy everything you think there is at least possibility for your ever needing, and then have all on your hands at last, a drug and in debt for the same. What is ever going to teach you? I don't know. My courage and hope for your succeeding in any business is very faint. Somebody at least will have to do all the managing. You have, it is true, a few years before you are of age. What character you may develop in that time remains to be seen. Now, talk about a chastisement. Her counsel to her own son, like, you're not going to be an amount of anything. Now, in 1868, we're going to rattle through some of her counsel. She says this: always make it a point to live within your income. Do without things rather than incur a debt. Never purchase an article without until you can pay for it. Never. She didn't follow that advice. What else does she say? She says to shun debts as you would a great evil. Shun debts. She said, it is true that the publishing house has furnished means to support branches of the work in distant fields, and has aided in carrying other enterprises. This is well. Not too much has been done. The Lord sees it all. But from the light he has given me, there you go, it's told her, from the light he has given me, every effort should be made to stand free of debt. You're not supposed to go into debt. This heavy indebtedness is eating into the vitals of the publishing house. Results of unselfishness and sacrifice. We should shun debt as a leprosy. As a leprosy. She goes on and says, let them guard themselves as with a fence of barbed wire against the inclination to go into debt. So don't go into debt. Ellen White, did you listen to yourself? So this is 1884, Sister Coolidge. She clearly says that Sister Coolidge lent me 1 year ago. I'm perplexed. I can find no writing except the one calling for $1,000. Now, $1,000 in today's income is $32,000, just to put it into context. Okay, this is 1884. Did she go into debt? She clearly was in debt. Okay. Here she's in debt to Frank for $250. Now that seems like nothing, but $250 is over $9,000 today. Clearly in debt. And you can justify, well, she was trying to do this or that or whatever. But again, this is against her own counsel. We should shun it like leprosy. What else? All of her debts are paid except, okay, what do we have right here? $5,000 that I owe the Review and Herald. Now, this was some of this was omitted, okay, but $5,000. That is over $185,000 owed in today's dollars. Ellen, you're supposed to shun it like leprosy, is what she's telling everyone else. Here's an interesting side note. She says that I owe one of the Wessels in Africa 1,000 pounds. Now, connecting 1,000 pounds to today's dollars, converting it all, 1,000 pounds is over $100,000. Now, she was hoping to get large royalties that would cover this. She was hoping, but she was in over her head. Okay? She says that she owes, notice this, in regards to Desire of Ages. I receive from my books. Notice she's getting an income, salary and income from her books. Okay? Sometimes I appropriate what is not due from the publishing house beforehand. And then, of course, I can receive but little from them. She's hoping that she's going to get from the sale of Desire of Ages will help me to pay for some of my debts. In America, I owe nearly $10,000. In this country, nearly $5,000. This will show you how Sister White is getting rich. Now, she was supposed to claim that she wasn't getting rich. That's what she was claiming, okay? I want you to understand, okay, that $10,000 is nearly, it's over, both of those combined, 10,000 and 5,000, is over $570,000 today. These are borrowed from people, wealthy individuals, friends. And then in 1903, this is close to the end of her, like the last decade. What does she say? I owe, okay, I do not claim as my own one bit of the property that I own. Well, it's yours anyways, okay? It went to your estate, right? I owe $20,000, which I have borrowed to invest in the Lord's work. Okay? The money that others I should have to pay for rent, I now pay an interest on that money, which I borrowed to secure this home. Friends, do you know what $200,000 or $20,000 is in today's dollars? It's over $720,000. $750,000 was borrowed from some. This is not going to a bank. This is from people for the Lord's work. Now, upon her death, the White estate reports that she had, and I actually saw this, someone made the comment on this. The White estate reports, this is in the White estate. I extracted this from just a couple of days ago, actually just yesterday. I extracted this. Ellen White wisely warned against the dangers of indebtedness. She didn't apparently listen, okay? But when she died, she owed nearly $90,000. Now, I'm going to pause. $90,000 in today's dollars is $2.8 to $2.9 million. Okay? 90, that's what she owed. Almost $3 million in assets in today's dollars. In debts. Her assets were only $65,000, which equates to $2 to $2.1 million, which brings a net loss, a shortfall of somewhere between $800,000 to $900,000 at death. Now, the Adventist denomination picked up the tab. That's what happened. Okay? This is despite the fact that she very clearly stated what should be going on. If the church should help such individuals, she's talking about people that were in debt. If the church should help such individuals, instead of leaving them in to rely upon their own resources, they would injure them in the end. And they would look to the church and expect to receive help from them. And do not practice self-denial. This is a load of malarkey. She died with massive amounts of debt. And the church picked up the tab. Notice what it says. And if they do not receive help every time, Satan tempts them. And they become jealous and very conscientious for their brother, fearing that they do not do all their duty to them. The mistake is on their own part. They're deceived. They are not the Lord's poor. Ellen White, I guess you weren't either. And notice what she says next. This is, again, 1900. It is displeasing to God for our churches to be burdened with debt. Interesting. So the question here, it's interesting. Was she displeasing? So, like, when her debts burdened the church, that's what happened. We know that. Almost $800,000 to $900,000 in today's money was paid off by the church. Now, some will argue that's because, like, well, some of her writings and royalties and blah, blah, blah paid it off. No, the church paid it off. Okay. She went contrary to the very statement here that she made. Does this mean that God was displeased with her work? I thought she was the messenger of God. I thought that she wasn't a hypocrite. I thought that she listened to her own writings. Now, her own counsel. Okay? Her own counsel. And friends, we're getting close. I know this is a long segment. We're getting close. Okay? Her own counsel in the 1880s. What does she say? I call upon our brethren to cease the robbery of God. Some are so situated with that wills must be made. Oh wait, she had a will too, by the way. But in doing so, care should be taken not to give to sons and daughters means which should flow into the treasury. There it is. You shouldn't give money to your family. You shouldn't give money to your family. And instead, it should flow to the treasury. These wills often become the subject of quarrel and dissension. You are his agents. Holding his property and his claim should have your first consideration. Notice what she says. God's claim should be considered first, not your family. Not your family. God should be considered first. Now, here's what's crazy about this. What's crazy is that, here's the last. I'll kind of share this last segment here. Let none feel in liberty to retain their tithe to use according to their own judgment. We're going to talk about the tithe in just a second. Okay. She explicitly claimed that you should first consider God's word. When you die, you should give the money to the treasury. Your homes, your assets, all of it should be considered not to your kids, not to your legacy. It needs to be given to the ministry of God. Yet, here's what we find. What we find is that her own prioritization was very liberal in her will to her sons, her grandchildren, before ever addressing, in fact, she never addressed her debts and final expenses. That was all taken by the denomination. The deficiencies of her debts were paid by the backs of the members of their sacrificial gift, their sacrifice towards the mission, and her estate was given to her sons and grandchildren. That's what happened. So we should feel this real tension, this real struggle with regards to the money that's being dealt with. Now, as we finish out the segment today, I want to talk about just tithe for just a quick second. We're going to spend maybe 5 minutes on tithing. We're going to round out the segment. Okay. We notice here that in 1896, she says, "Let none feel at liberty to retain their tithe. Don't retain the tithe. To use according to their own judgment." I didn't realize where my parents got this. You shouldn't decide where your money goes. You should give it to the church, and the church should do it, right? You should, and this is what Ellen White's saying. They are not to use it for themselves in any emergency, nor to apply it to their see fit, even in what they may regard as the Lord's work. 1896, don't do this. Okay, fascinating. Well,
My brother, I wish to say to you, be careful how you move. You are not moving wisely. The least you have to speak about the tithe that has been appropriated to the most needy and the most discouraging field in the world, the more sensible you will be. It has been presented to me for years that my tithe was to be appropriated by myself to aid the white and colored ministers who were neglected and did not receive sufficient properly to support their families.
oh, so Ellen, everyone else is not supposed to use the money for their own emergencies, but yet it's been presented to her that she's supposed to do all this. She goes on. By the way, this is a letter written to Elder Watson. This is a longer segment. We're going to keep listening.
When my attention was called to aged ministers, white or black, it was my special duty to investigate into their necessities and supply their needs. This was to be my special work, and I have done this in a number of cases. No man should give notoriety to the fact that in special cases the tithe is used in that way. In regard to the colored work in the South, that field has been and is still being robbed of the means that should come to the workers of that field.
Interesting.
If there has been cases where our sisters have appropriated their tithe to the support of the ministers working for the colored people in the South, let every man, if he is wise, hold his peace. I have myself appropriated my tithe to the most needy cases brought to my notice. I have been instructed to do this, and as the money is not withheld from the Lord's treasury, it is not a matter that should be commented upon, for it will necessitate my making known these matters which I do not desire to do, because it is not best.
Did you just catch what? Did you just catch what she just said? Please catch what she just said. She's telling Elder Watson to not disclose any of this. That she's been told to relegate these funds, even though she's told other people that you're never to do this. And this is shady stuff right here. It is not a matter that would be commented upon. She's not going to talk about it, for it will necessitate my making known these matters. She'll have to tell everyone about it. That's what she's saying. Which I do not desire to do because it is not best.
Some cases have been kept before me for years, and I have supplied their needs from the tithe, as God has instructed me to do. And if any person shall say to me, Sister White, will you appropriate my tithe where you know it is most needed? I shall say, yes, I will. And I have done so. I commend those sisters who have placed their tithe where it is most needed to help to do a work that is being left undone. And if this matter is given publicity, it will create knowledge which would better be left as it is. I do not care to give publicity to this work which the Lord has appointed me to do, and others to.
You can't make this stuff up.
I send this matter to you so that you shall not make a mistake. Circumstances alter cases. I would not advise that any should make a practice of gathering up tithe money. But for years there have now and then been persons who have lost confidence in the appropriation of the tithe, who have placed their tithe in my hands and said that if I did not take it, they would themselves appropriate it to the families of the most needy minister they could find. I have taken the money, given a receipt for it, and told them how it was appropriated. I write this to you so that you shall keep cool and not become stirred up and give publicity to this matter, lest many more shall follow their example.
So, friends, catch what she's saying. Like, don't tell other people I'm doing this, but we don't want to stir this. Like, we don't want Conrad Vine. That's what we don't want Conrad Vine stuff to happen. Is what's going on here. Okay. So what's notable is that in 1896, she says none are at liberty. Like, you're not supposed to do this. The standards, this clearly kind of sits in a tension space with her 1905. This is like 9 years later. She's saying, I have done this practice, but 1896, none are supposed to do this. But God shows me, you can trust me. Now, some of these practices from Ellen White, okay, just so you know, okay, some of these practices from Ellen White, they ended up spreading to other members, just as she was concerned about. After all, I mean, they were literally just following their prophetess's lead. And instead of rebuking them for not sending their tithe to the SDA Corporation, she actually commends them for ignoring her 1896 testimony by giving their tithe. That's what's happening in this Elder Watson thing. Can you imagine this happening today? I mean, and what's probably more concerning, if you paid attention to her writing, what's more concerning is that in her letter, she warns Elder Watson to not give notoriety to what she was doing and to hold his peace. Don't freak out. Okay? Keep things quiet. Keep your mouth shut. I don't want other people to be concerned. Now, here's the reality of what happened. People were concerned. Okay? They were clearly concerned because this is actually E.S. Ballinger. This is later on. This is E.S. Ballinger in 1932. We have a document that's in the Gathering Call, and we are notated that very clearly the rumors were speculating. Okay? Here's what's said. Once before, we received a very abusive letter from a worker in India. It was a little the most abusive communication we have ever received. Not many months after its arrival, we were informed that this brother was sent home because of the misappropriation of conference money. Surprise, surprise. We were wondering whether the author of our second bitter communication may not be of the same class. However, our brother did not attempt to make any explanation whatever of Mrs. White's plagiarism, nor of her 90,000 indebtedness, nor of the manner of many omissions which Mrs. White has made from her early writings. He did not attempt to explain any of the mistakes in the teachings of Adventists, nor their sins in their practices. He just vented his feelings on us. He compared us to the dogs that licked the sores of Lazarus. We are wondering which is worse in the sight of God, for one to lick the sores of the poor outcast, or to be among the pack that makes the sores. Now, it's very clear that the concerns had spread. This was 1932. So the record shows 2 tracks here. A public ethic urging believers to sell. We know that she is telling other people to sell. to avoid debt, to route their tithe through the established God's treasury, fortified with promises and warnings of eternal confidence. Like everything's going to be good. And then what do we have on the flip side? We have a private arc coming from Ellen White of expanding her own real estate holdings across multiple states and countries across the world, sustained periods of significant debt that's taken on by private people, discretionary tithe allocations, and a will that basically favors the family first. The opening line that I mentioned as we got into this today, the opening line should be very clear. God would have us learn also how deep is his hatred and contempt for all hypocrisy and deception. We're not going to flatten out these quotes. We're going to let people see them for what they are. Okay? How do we interpret this stuff? How do we deal with the problems? Do you consider this just, well, this is just this is just humans being humans? Or is this just another example of Ellen White's the spirit of hypocrisy? She's not the spirit of prophecy. She's the spirit of hypocrisy. Friends, thank you for being here. Tonight was a longer segment. If this deep dive has your mind spinning and shifting and confused, and listen, you're not alone. This is crazy stuff. I told you today was going to be nutty. What do you think? Do you think this is divine double standards? Or is it just human flaws? Amplified by power? Was she just becoming a controlled spiritual leader with money? What do you think? I mean, does this, in your opinion, does it shatter the spirit of prophecy? Or is there, as I always ask, is there some sort of defense I'm missing? Am I just missing the context? So, sip slow, think carefully. The documents are here. The quotes are here. I ask you to go back and pause it, take screenshots, look at the documents. They're all on the table. But listen, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for this deep dive. Thank you for asking the hard questions. Thank you for testing the prophet. If today's journey was surprising, challenging, uncomfortable, good. I'm glad it was. As I always say, I'm grateful. That means that you're at least thinking. You're using your mind. So thank you. I can't wait till the next one as I begin to work through the next episode to see what else kind of filters out of the narrative, the official narrative of the conference. But be sure to subscribe. Make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure that you subscribe. Scan the QR code if you can. I would be overjoyed to have you join our Discord channel where we discuss and dialogue and dig into more things than just Ellen White. We talk about all things Bible. I hope to see you there, friends. For now, I'm Mike Colburn from Thinking Cup. I will see you on the next episode where we again will shine even more light on the uncomfortable side of truth. Until then, keep searching, keep testing, and please, most certainly, keep thinking for yourself. Stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one.